the sun shines bright and the seeds are sown. Portugal, it's the place to be. Join the community, come and see. Expats Portugal.
So thank you very much for being here from Reis Pellicano, Andrea Gonçalves, and we've got Daniel Reis as well on the webinar with us. For this evening, we're talking about your will in Portugal, what expats need to know to stay protected. Don't leave it to chance, is the advice. Understand how Portuguese law affects your assets and your loved ones, whether you're thinking about moving to Portugal or you're in the process of relocating or you're already living here, as many of our members are. Understanding how estate planning and wills work in Portugal is something every foreign resident should take time to consider. So we'll be doing that this evening with the expert help of Andrea Gonçalves from Reis and Pellicano. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much, Carl.
It's good to see you. It's good to see you. I've got a first question for you. And if people don't hear anything else this evening, it's really important, isn't it, that people don't assume that the will they already have from their native country will see them home and dry in terms of their estate planning and wishes after death here in Portugal. It's a big mistake that people make, and it's a very important distinction that we are covering tonight. So that's my first question to you. Tell me a little bit more about that and how that actually needs to be here in Portugal.
Of course, you are completely right. So having your will back in your home country, your nationality country, does not mean that you are fully protected once you move to Portugal. This is because of what our law has stated, and this also has to do with European regulations. According to the most important European regulation on this matter, the law that's going to rule your succession, and when I say succession, I'm not only talking about Portuguese assets, I'm also talking about any other asset that you may have worldwide, will be your residency law. So this means that if your fiscal residency is in Portugal, the Portuguese law will apply to the whole succession. We need to see this as a piece of cake, the cake itself, and not several pieces where you have your assets. So this is the first thing. No assumptions that you have wills worldwide. If you are living in Portugal, then you shall consider an international will here in Portugal as well.
That's quite a wake-up call for people, I think, and you need to take action. Otherwise, that will be the default.
It will, because we do know of situations where people do not indicate expressly the law that they want applicable. Then they pass away, and their heirs and other people that they may have the right to people's assets can see the situation very, very difficult. And in Portugal, we do have a lot of bureaucracy regarding this area. And also a lot of rules that apply, inclusively rules that we cannot waive.
Right, very interesting. Let's go into some of those, shall we? This idea of forced heirship. So as it makes it sound like an airship, doesn't it? I mean, HEIR, forced heirship, and successors, who I think are equally surprised by the first point that we were discussing there. But now we're moving on to the inheritance laws and this idea of forced heirship. What does that mean, and what sort of surprises does that bring to people?
Yes. I'm going to pick the US law where almost everything is allowed, and you are allowed to dispose and to divide your assets as you wish. Nothing is imposed to you. This is a quite different in Portugal, where you have what you were talking about, Carl, forced heirship. This means that there is only a very small portion of your assets that you can divide and deliver to whoever you want. And when I talk about a small portion, it's very, very small. I'm talking about 1/3 of your assets can be divided as you wish. The other 2/3 have to be divided as the succession laws in Portugal state. For example, if you die with a spouse and children, both of them, the spouse and all the children, will have the right to your assets. For example, in the US, it's very, very common that when you pass away, all your assets pass on to your spouse, 100% of them. And only after the death of your spouse, they can be divided by your children. This is not possible in Portugal. Okay, and this is something that people sometimes don't understand, or they think that this is only applicable to the Portuguese assets. It is not. It is applicable to the entire succession and the entire assets a person may have.
Again, quite the shock for people discovering this for the first time. And we've been raised, haven't we, on films and soap operas where people are gathered around the video. I don't know if people can remember this scenario. And to my wife and to my cats and so on, it's not like that here. There is this forced heirship that's in operation here in Portugal. Absolutely fascinating. And has been
Correct.
the case, I suspect, for a very long time. Right, moving on then, if people think, oh my goodness, this is another bit of paperwork and bureaucracy I need to attend to so that inevitability doesn't happen. Presumably there's an upside as well. If people engage you to create the will that might point towards their original will, what other advantages can you bring at in at that point for protection and to have people's wishes granted following their death?
Of course. The first thing to know is that by having a will in Portugal, the first thing that we say is we choose the law of the nationality that we want applicable. So if you want to waive the Portuguese laws, then what can I choose? Any other law or any law that where I have lived, for example? No. According to the European regulation, we can only choose and waive the Portuguese law by choosing the law of our nationality. And you may point out, what if I have several nationalities? Then you're the lucky one and you can choose the one that better fits you and has the better laws, let's say that way, that suit your interests. Okay. Afterwards, once we have chosen the nationality law to be applicable, then we will analyze that law and see if your wishes fit inside that specific law. Because then, waiving the Portuguese law, we do not have to go to the forced heirship, go to the mandatory shares that we also have. So you choose the law and then we draft the Portuguese will according to the law that we have chosen.
Very good. Excellent. Okay, so some light at the end of that tunnel. Pardon the poor choice of words possibly there. But this complication, that doesn't mean that everything, all the assets are necessarily here in Portugal because somebody's moved here. People have their assets and savings and estate spread all over the world. Does that remain a complication? How do you manage that? The sort of multiply located assets and savings and the legacy, basically, that might be spread all over the world. How is that managed for people?
There's absolutely no problem in that case. I'll start the other way around. You may live here, have no assets, no bank accounts, no cars, no properties, and you should leave a will. Just to determine the law, and then everything worldwide will be applied that exact law.
Okay.
This means that this is the way we also have the will that you have in another country enforceable.
Right.
So if we say, I want the US law to be applicable, I have a US will that states how I want to divide all the assets I have worldwide, we have the problem solved.
Right, very good. And that does assume a legal executor or legal assistance here in Portugal. This is probably something that no mere mortal should take on their own with such complications.
Yes, that's it. We have also faced here situations where people don't know what do I do with the will afterwards. In that case, people should have an executor. There are still some steps to take after the person passes away and to enforce the will itself. So having an executor, here in Portugal, we call it a testamenteiro, is the person that will know that there is a will in Portugal, that will know what steps are to be taken after the death of someone and will take care of everything afterwards.
Which would be very reassuring. Your relatives living in other countries wouldn't have the faintest idea what to do. So that would be a very reassuring presence or personnel to appoint in anticipation of this situation, which none of us escapes. And yeah, you mentioned after death, writing the will can have some aspects that are to do with before your death. So a power of attorney, appointing the executor, and healthcare directives. This is becoming more of a popular matter, isn't it? People are more willing to talk about it, and how part of there will be directives about their end of life care and such things. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Yes. Before I go to that, Carl, you have talked about powers of attorney.
Mm,
I'll just like to make a parenthesis about that because powers of attorney, as for example, we have in the US, are not understood nor they are applicable here in Portugal. Powers of attorney in Portugal are only for people who know what they're signing, who understand the effects of the powers they have granted to someone, and only until they continue to understand those powers. From the
right.
time that someone is no longer able to determine their wishes, do not understand what the power of attorney is for, and also the powers, we are no longer able to use that power of attorney. We have another instrument here. It's a legal lawsuit, and it's called the process of maior acompanhado.
Okay.
Okay. So powers of attorney understood in this sense of I want to leave something to someone if I'm not able to determine the path of my assets. This is not understood. Having the regime of maior acompanhado is only possible, and you can only use it if and when you are no longer able to determine what you want to do with your assets. So this is not something that you can predict, nor you can use just in case. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
But and what's the sequence of that? I mean, I'm familiar with the British version of this, which is power of attorney, and there are two types, and you elect for which ones you want, and you can do that, a long time before you find yourself in any difficulty. What's the time scale in Portugal for that? Is it the same?
Here we don't have that. So imagine that I am no longer able to determine what I want to do or how to manage my assets. For
Yes.
example, my spouse, my parents, someone that's more familiar and more closer to me, goes to the court and says this person is no longer able to determine what to do to their assets or even to their person itself, and the
Yes.
court will decide the powers that will be granted to someone else to do that on my behalf, for example. So
Right.
this is only at the time someone needs it, and it has to be seen and determined by the court.
That's another. I mean, we learn something every time we speak. Oh, well, many people will be learning a lot of new things this evening from you. And I've spoken to you before on these topics, and I learn something new every time. And that's it tonight. That particular aspect of how that's different. And so it needs to be requested by the family, and not appointed by the person themselves in
Yes.
anticipation of that. That's quite a distinction, isn't it? Quite a difference. Okay, sorry, and I interrupted you. You were going to
Okay.
talk about health directives and that aspect of
That's
writing a
it.
will as well.
Until now, we have been talking about the will, international wills and nationality laws, but what will? In this case, we have been talking until now about assets wills. Let's call it that way.
Yes.
In Portugal, we have healthcare directive, which is very similar to other countries that we have seen, and it is called the Testamento Vital. The Testamento Vital is a predetermined document made by the SNS, our national healthcare system. We cannot alter what is inside that request, and we just have to fill it out. Do I want this? Then I tick it. I don't want it. I don't tick it. If I want to leave some observations, what I want to be done with me or not, if I'm not able to determine my wishes for any instance. Healthcare directive systems is the equivalent to the Testamento Vital, only for healthcare matters.
All right. Okay.
It's
Very interesting.
completely different. It's inserted in the national healthcare system. Okay.
Yeah.
It's free. So you need to have your healthcare national number. And with that, you also discuss it with your doctor in a normal doctor's appointment. And then we have an institute that does all the registries. Those healthcare, those testamentos vitais, those healthcare directive systems are valid for 5 years. Of course,
Are they? Right. Okay.
yes. And
Right.
then they are renewed. You can alter them at any time, and you can have them also available with you. You can print out the form and just stick it in your car, stick it in your documents.
Yes.
You have very easy access to that.
Interesting. And on that, in that same sort of area, organ donation, that's automatic here in Portugal, as I understand it. And if you want to opt out, you have to do that proactively, don't you?
Yes, you are correct. So that is another institute. Once again, bureaucracy in Portugal is a wonderful thing.
Yes.
And so all people are considered organ donors. If you do not want to be one, then you have to opt out. It's
Right.
also a simple request, but you need to say that clearly.
We are possibly challenging or illuminating a lot of possible assumptions here this evening, aren't we? Don't, I mean, I think that's a general rule, isn't it? It's best not to assume that what went on in your country of origin is necessarily what's going to happen here in many aspects of life. But certainly we're seeing that tonight when it comes to creating a will and dealing with your estate. Taxation, then, this I guess might be another pre-will, pre-death consideration about how things are structured in the partnership, in a marriage or a relationship. What would you say on the matter of taxation coming up to the death and then thereafter? What sort of things might people be aware of with regards to taxation, Andrea?
Right. Okay, in terms of taxation, the application of taxes in Portugal applies only to the Portuguese assets. This means that, okay, we have established a common law to rule all my assets worldwide, but if I have to pay taxes, or if my heirs or the people who I bequest assets to need to pay taxes, then it only implies the payment of Portuguese assets. What about if I'm a foreign resident and I'm inheriting tax assets here in Portugal? I am still due to pay stamp duty.
Mhm.
The amount of stamp duty is 10% of the amount that we provide that asset. Normally, for example, the most common case, I'm an heir of property, or I have been bequest here a property. In that case, if I am not a person that am exempt from taxation, I'll tell you right away who they are. I'm liable to pay 10% of the patrimonial amount of the tax. That's the amount that's in the caderneta predial, so the tax value of the property. Pay
Yes.
10% of that amount. There are people who are exempt for paying taxes, and normally those are the ascendants, the descendants, like children, grandchildren, spouses. Normally, these people do not pay any tax. So, the state here is giving you an okay that you inherit something from your parents, or from your children. If you have no spouse or children, you still have parents, they will be your heirs. And therefore, these people, they are specifically indicated in the stamp duty law. They do not pay taxes. All other people, friends, nieces, nephews, brothers and sisters, siblings, they do pay this 10% tax.
It is one of the better differences, isn't it, that you don't pay any inheritance as a direct descendant. And I think
Yes.
Gilda notably said when we were talking about this before, Portugal is not only a good place to live, it's a good place to die as well from that from
It
that
is.
point
On
of view.
that point, it is, yes.
Yes, yeah, a little bit of lightheartedness in what is quite a difficult and heavy subject and something we might not wish to talk about. But thank you so much for being here this evening to talk about it. I've got a couple more questions for you. I want to say
Mhm.
hello as well to some of our premium members here who, of course, can basically ask you questions in private after we've concluded the main recording here. And they've asked a few questions already. Alex, I'll get to your question. Debbie, good evening to you. Ed and Sharon, Krista, Raby, and Laurie, and Mr. S. Pedder as well. Thank you all for your questions. We will get to those, Mr. S. So I will come back to those, Andrea too. And I want to ask you, in this idea of, or certainly the difficulty of talking about death and wills and so on, it is probably best. Well, it's definitely best, isn't it, to address it, to grasp the nettle, as it were, bite the bullet, and have the conversation with you. Can you give us a sense of the time scale for that? What's the best time? Because there's a lot going on for people, isn't there, when they're moving from one country to this country, and they've got so many things to think about. This might be something we're thinking, well, okay, I'll deal with that once I've settled in, settled down. Would you agree with that, or would you prompt them to think about this in a different way?
My advice is always to think about if I'm a foreigner, if I'm moving to Portugal, living here, altering my fiscal address to Portugal, then that should be the time to think about having a will in place. You don't
Right.
know the future, anything can happen. And by the time that you are considered a resident in Portugal, it can be very difficult to prove that you have very little connection with our country.
Mm,
And therefore, the Portuguese law is automatically implied and will be
yes.
applicable in that event. So, although I say I'm not old or I don't know, I don't want to, it can be a thing, and I say the sooner the better.
Fair enough. And you'll know, of course, what happens when people don't do that, and what the implications are for the family picking it up and having to come to you and say, look, I haven't got the faintest idea what to do here. We need your help. What sort of things do happen? I mean, I think the phrase in other countries, is it dying intestate? Is that the phrase?
Yes.
What happens here, specifically with that process, and what are some of the implications if someone hasn't taken care of it?
The worst case scenario that we can face is that any wishes that a person may have in any other country, especially the nationality country, may not be used and may not be worshipped.
Right.
Because if it goes against the Portuguese laws, we do not have any other way to make them enforceable, even saying this was that person's last wish. Portuguese entities don't care. If
Yeah.
I am leaving all my assets to a friend of mine, but I don't leave a Portuguese or an international will in Portugal, stating that I want the US law, the UK law, whatsoever law to be applicable, Portuguese laws do not allow us to waive forced heirship. So my friend cannot inherit or be bequest of any other asset.
So if you have an unusual situation or an unusual request, you better make sure that's dealt with as soon as possible.
Yes, correct. Of course, that if you say, Andrea, I only have children and my spouse, and I'm okay if both of them are going to inherit my assets according to the Portuguese law,
Yeah.
that's totally fine.
Okay.
However, every time you have, I wouldn't say better call, every time you have any request that does not go with the Portuguese law, have your will in place.
There you go. Thank you for that. Let's take a few of the questions from the premium members. Don't worry, premium members, if you've got questions that you'd rather not ask or be aired during the recording, we can do that a little bit later on. Does a will written in Portugal hold authority in the US if your beneficiaries are in the US? How do heirs in the US, this is probably the important part, how do heirs in the US claim inheritance in Portugal? How does that process work for those heirs?
Okay, the first thing is knowing that there is a will in place. So that's why the figure here of an executor is important. And
Yes.
normally, what we are seeing is that people are choosing, for example, the same executor of the US will is the executor of the Portuguese will. So that may be one of the first things to do. And secondly, and of major importance, is have an if in Portugal. So without an if, you do nothing. So have an if in place. And afterwards, with that NIF, we are able to help you and guide you through the process of having all the steps complete until you are able to register assets in your name. Let me just make another parenthesis here
Yes.
that when we talk about having a will in place, it's very important in Portugal regarding assets that are registered. Now, I'm
Right.
talking about art that may be registered, plots, houses, vehicles, bank accounts, which is very, very important because we have major problems with that. And everything that has to go to any registry in Portugal. Because if you say, I don't have anything, and the only thing that I have is all the furniture in my house, then that's completely okay. No one needs to know. It will be divided as you wish or not. So that's not the major importance of having a will.
And how do you register art, for example?
There are pieces of art that you need to have communicated to the legal entities, depending on what they are. It's not
Oh,
any
I see.
piece. So it's very, very specific pieces of art. If you buy a Picasso, you need to have it registered. So I'm talking about those types of art and not other types of art that you may have.
Right. Okay. Well, I'll make sure I deal with that after the show.
Of course.
Okay. Right. Wow. Interesting. So interesting. So many aspects to this. Thank you for being here. How is Portugal going to seize my estate from the US? I'm not buying property in Portugal after the new nationality law. Someone a bit sore there about the legal changes that we have a separate and special recording for, and also a chance to talk about in the Dream Team session. But I mean, they are able to, right? Portugal could track down foreign assets.
Yes, they can track that down. And even if you present, you have here a property in Portugal, or you have to present documents. If a person dies here, one of the steps that needs to be complete, and this one has timelines, it has to be complete until the third month after the death, is the communication to the tax authority. You have to go there and say that person was deceased. And if you do not do this in these timelines, then you may be able and need to pay a fine for that. Okay,
My
so
goodness.
even after death, if you do not comply with tax authorities' timelines, you will or may incur in a fine. And here they say, well, does the person have assets or they don't? Normally, people only tell the assets that they have in Portugal. And you may ask me, well, how are they going to do that? When you say that you are a resident here in Portugal, the tax authority knows. Your home country knows as well. So this
Yes.
is how they can cross information.
And that's basically once you become a fiscal resident here, you're opening up a portal to your worldwide assets, aren't you?
Yes.
Really? Yes. Okay. So it's interesting in Portugal then, they say there's two certainties in life, death and taxes, but there's actually three in Portugal. There's death, taxes, and then some more taxes after death.
That's
Perhaps.
it.
Okay. And I've heard as well, I mean, the to use a Portuguese phrase, the people that finance us in this regard are very pau queijo queijo. They don't mess about, do they? If you owe something, they'll tell you that there's not much compassion or sympathy in this situation.
They certainly will, and you will receive a letter at home, even if they don't tell you face to face.
Yes, very good. Well, not very good, but good to know. Good to know that that's exactly how it is here. Will US law apply on worldwide assets, including Portugal assets, or it will only apply to US assets? I think you've answered that basically before, haven't you?
Yes, once again, the picture that you need to see is we cannot see assets as pieces of cake. We need to see the succession as the whole cake itself.
Good analogy.
Okay, so the law that will be applicable, and as we are subject to the European regulations, and what they say is the law that's going to rule all my succession is the law of my last residency.
Yes, yes. Okay, thank you. Testamento Vital, that's from the SNS, I think you said before. So
Yes,
do you
correct.
help people get their SNS numbers?
We sometimes we do.
Yeah.
This is something that has been quite difficult until you have your residence permits. After that, we're able to help you, of
I
course.
thought I would ask. I thought I would ask because people often do need help with those. And mayor acompañado, that is, thank you, Daniel. You've spelled that for people who need that in the chat as well. And may I leave my USA assets to USA beneficiaries as per my USA will, and leave my Portugal assets to Portugal beneficiaries? I guess if you've configured your wills appropriately, that can happen, can it not?
Yes, it can. The
Yes.
only thing that we need to bear in mind is, are the wishes and are the dispositions that I'm leaving in the will applicable in my home country, in the law of the nationality I'm choosing?
Hmm.
Because if it says no, imagine, for example, that US law would not allow you to leave assets to friends. Then, of
Yes.
course, you could not do that. Okay.
Yes.
So we need to see, one, first, choose the law of the nationality, and secondly, analyze that law, the nationality law, to see if your requests can be met or not with that law. But that's
And
completely true and fine to state in a will.
thank you, Andrea. And I suspect there might be some help available on the Portuguese side for leaving assets to Portuguese charities or so on? Is there help with that? Is there a like a directory of such things? You know, in the way that you can donate to a charity annually through your NIF number. Is there another way of organizations, associations making themselves available to you to ask for your bequest?
In this case, it's exactly as another person that you would bequest or leave assets to. So, in terms of taxes, once again, there are certain entities, normally public entities, that are connected to charity, that they will be exempt from the payment of that 10% tax. But otherwise, you are freely able to leave your assets to any charity. So, there's nothing very specific on that regard.
Okay, thank you for that. Valerie, I think, yes, of course, you can email in for support from Expats Portugal, and specifically in this instance from Reis Pellicano, we can certainly put you in touch when you're ready. If that's what you mean. If it's not, let's bring that up a little bit later on there. Debbie, I think we've dealt with that particular situation there. What is the specific situation? Golden visas. We'll come back to that and ask that question of Daniel in regard to nationality, citizenship. Yeah, there seem to be some questions about that. Staying with wills, estates. What if you're a resident of Portugal, you do not have a will, and all your assets are in a trust in USA, except for a Portuguese bank account? How would this be treated if the person passes? Trust in the USA?
That's the tricky part. So once again, there can be connection between assets, and you may face a situation where the Portuguese entities know about assets that you have worldwide. The law that will be applicable will be the Portuguese law, and you can face a situation where you do not have any regulation, you do not have any valid wishes because the law is the Portuguese one that you did not waive. And trust is something that we do not have in Portugal, once again, as they are understood in the US. And therefore, you can be in a situation that all that you have constructed, built in, and done throughout the years are not valid dispositions to leave.
Thanks, Andrea. And just a couple more, and then we'll go to your more personally put questions in a moment. It's been great talking to you as ever, Andrea, from Reis Pellicano. I already have a will, says Raby, written here by my Portuguese notary, which states my wishes regarding assets, including which law is applicable. This case is that all I need to have in place, basically, is the question. Once that's been set up by the notary, is that it?
Yes, it is.
All right.
And the will be valid until you want it. Note that in Portugal, and this is something that has been raised a lot by our clients, is what if I want to amend it? What if I want to insert a small little things? We do not have codicils, we do not have amendments to wills. So every time you want a small alteration, you need to do a new will. However,
Interesting. Again, another assumption one might make.
that's it. So we don't have codicils, we don't have amendments. I do not want it to go to my brother, I want it to go to my sister. We need to have a new will in place. So in Portugal, you only have one document.
That's fascinating, isn't it? And the language, the jargon is so amazing. Codicils, you need, because I guess in other countries you have people on the phone every other day with a new thing. I don't want them to have it. I want them to have it now. But you're gonna have to write a whole new will.
That's it. And this is where our intervention is also very important. So we try to draft the wills, and although we are not the professionals per excellence and empowered by the state to have the will with us archived, we are the ones that draft it in a way that it corresponds to your wishes now and may correspond to your wishes along your life. So, a lot of things may happen. We're talking here about death, but we hope that people have long lives. And so what I have now may not be what I have in the future. Do I need to alter it every time I buy a house, every time I swap my car? Maybe you don't. So this is where we enter and we help you develop that type of will. And so what Rani, if I'm not mistaken, was saying,
Raby, yeah.
Raby, then if the will that you have in place still corresponds to your wishes, then you don't have to alter it.
Very interesting. That's a great approach, isn't it? Sort of a component approach that's alterable if the need be, but otherwise, if not, all well and good. Great. Just a quick clarification, then one final question for you. Anything carried over, we will make sure it gets asked in the second section for Expats Portugal Premium members. Just to clarify then for Debbie, in Portugal, I know spouses and children of parents are automatic beneficiaries, but are siblings? What was the distinction there? Is it just descendants and ascendants, if that's cool?
It's spouse and descendants, the first one, and then if you don't have descendants, then that's the spouse and the ascendants.
Yes.
When you don't have those, then we push on to the third step, and that's where siblings enter, uncles, nieces, and all of them. If
And
you
that's
don't
when you
have anyone in this world, then you
Yes.
have the biggest one, the state.
Oh, okay. They always win.
That's it.
And that's where it goes to those emails, doesn't it? In these sort of distant cousins and so on, you get the email from Reis Pellicano from the distant relative saying you've now got a cottage in central Portugal. Very interesting. Thank you so much. One final question for you, then, Andrea. Your foremost piece of advice as we conclude our webinar this evening. What's the one thing you want people to know as we conclude this evening?
I really want people to know that assumptions is not something good. If you have your will in another country, do contact us. Do think about having a will in place. I'm not very happy to say this, but the Portuguese succession laws in many aspects are not the best to fulfill the requirements and the wishes of people that have come from abroad. So having a will in place is very, very important. The sooner the better.
Very good. Andrea Gonçalves of Reis Pellicano. And thank you to Daniel in the background as well. Thank you both so much for being here this evening and talking about wills and estate planning. And you can find the contact details for Andrea and for Daniel, of course, in the Expats Portugal business directory. And there's a nice smattering of applause for you coming up on the screen. We're not over yet, though. We're not done. We have time to ask a few questions. Great job, Andrea. Thank you so much.
Looking for a place to call your own, where the sun shines bright and the seeds are sown. Portugal, it's the place to be.